us begin.
Super Mario Galaxy is a video game created by a studio that, to date, has not only never released a bad video game, but has never released an average video game. In fact, they've never released a good one. They've exclusively produced genre-defining masterpieces. It's their MO, seemingly. Yes, including Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. No, I did not stutter. Super Mario Galaxy is like a magnetic train. Super Mario Galaxy creates a bond between the player and the game that is unshakable, unbreakable. Most of all, because it trusts the player to understand, because it weaves a complex, emotionally charged narrative that players can choose, and in many cases do choose to ignore. It's there if you look for it, but if you don't, they trust you to make that decision for yourself. They don't explain or pander, shy away from anything. Conversely, they don't force you to engage either. Super Mario Galaxy cares not for setting the bar low. Super Mario Galaxy sets the bar high. Super Mario Galaxy dares to be more. Super Mario Galaxy believes that you are worth trying harder for, even if you're a kid. Super Mario Galaxy believes that you, that little kid with a blanket draped over your shoulders, glasses slightly loose falling off your nose, up in the attic, sitting on a cushion mere meters from a hand-me-down flickering CRT, are worth the extra mile they ran. You are worth the cherry on top. You, the kid with the snot hanging out of his nose, with a brand new Wii remote in hand, hearing that iconic on the freakishly, eerily quiet night of that year's Christmas. The absence of noise in stark contrast to the ear-ringing banging of fireworks.
Oh shit! Oh, Jesus!
Fireworks, cacophony of drunken Christmas ballads, and Uncle Dave explaining why he's not actually racist, he's just trying to explain. Maybe you've a dog snuggled up beside you. Maybe it's your cat that has gone to sleep on your lap. The siblings and cousins, young and old, have long since settled down, some in your bedroom, and all the adults have passed out, or in Uncle Dave's case, have gone briefly missing, likely passed out in a field with someone he met an hour ago that he knew all his life. As you sit there, your brand new Wii, a mug of hot chocolate sitting next to you, destined to go cold, you slide your brand new disc into the slot, no doubt expecting a fun time, but soon to be left reeling by how much more there is to feel other than pure Super Mario induced inertia, because you, that kid, are worth that extra effort, that extra injection of imagination that makes Galaxy transcend its own medium. Because Galaxy is not a toy. Galaxy is a video game that creates an entire solar system, not simply to traipse through, but to explore and understand, should you be so inclined. Anything can be enjoyed by anyone. conventionally for adults media is often enjoyed most by children or teenagers, and often the reason for this is very obvious. Too much kids media disrespects the kid. Is it too much to ask of a film, book, or game to trust the kid to understand? To grasp what the point of the story is? Is it too much to ask of a film, book, or game to actually to try to make sense? Seemingly, yes.
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
And this is not to say that everything needs to tackle these grandiose themes of life or death. I mean, take for example a Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country respects the player enough not to place haphazard platforms that make no sense, that are abstract and vague, ambiguous. Rather, every level is constructed organically because it respects the player enough to try. And naturally, it will be remembered forever as a classic. And that's exactly it. It crystallized respect the audience no matter how young they are. It's for kids is often used to deflect any criticism. And this is, well, it's a very good deflection because it's true that kids set the bar low. Do kids notice the difference between a new Super Mario Bros. And a Donkey Kong Country? Do kids notice the writing, directing, and design conventions of, say, a Men in Black more than they noticed the action sequences, like when Will Smith entered the slipstream of time looking for revenge on the zebra from Madagascar and the ensuing drama? Technically, a kid's movie, game, book, anything has a low bar to reach, and most of the time, they reach it. So the question I'm trying to ask is, if it reaches that low bar, does that make a kid's film, book, or game good? Because a kid likes it for being mindless, that means it is good, right? Because kids don't care. Maybe, but I guess that just makes the art itself product. Where WALL-E is art, Despicable Me 2 is a product. Where New Super Mario Bros. 2 is a product, Donkey Kong Country is art. Regardless of how excellent that product is, that is all it will ever be. You cannot attain a peak you don't try to reach. But kids do care. I mean, like, come on, when's the last time you heard a kid say
Sega Saturn?
Because kids aren't kids forever, and kids know when they're being pandered to. So many folk who grew up playing the infamous Sonic 06 adore the game, despite its obvious flaws. This is because that, despite the flaws, it was a project by a group of people who desperately wanted to make something generational. The story, while flawed, is only so because of how they were rushed to assemble everything at the 11th hour. How many other kid-friendly mascot platformers dare to tell a story about whether it's moralistic to travel back in time and kill someone to save the world? I must reiterate at this point that what I'm saying is certainly subjective. And with this subjective take in particular, I risk losing all credibility, but well, Sonic 06 to my mind should be valued based on its artistic strength.
It's a gamer pad. Not many girls come in here because I get friend zoned so frequently.
Whereas a game like 2017's Sonic Forces, while functioning in a superior manner, while being a better toy, should not be valued.
Sonic, how I hate him.
Without Sonic, the people are losing hope.
Sonic is gone.
Finish Sonic. Sorry, I'm still not used to saying that.
Received some incredible news. Sonic is alive!
Says he's in a solitary confinement cell. They've been torturing him for months.
Hey, sounds like the party started. Want to let me go and join in? About you, not even your name.
You may call me infinite. You're not even worth the effort to finish off.
Just 3 short days, my plan will eliminate the bothersome lot of you.
Wait.
Goodbye, Sonic, my soon-to-be-eradicated nemesis.
But we destroyed
destroyed the Phantom Ruby's power source.
I had a backup power source created under Metropolis. It can't be! It's impossible to get under the Phantom Ruby's null space!
Something you wouldn't understand since you don't have any friends.
It is a slapdash. Despite the fact that 2006's Bugfest is a glitch-ridden nightmare to play, in retrospect, more appreciable, more respectable, because of how earnestly the team tried to create something remarkable. And even though they failed, nobody will forget how hard they tried in the first place. It's still a bad game, but I believe that as time goes on, our rose-tinted glasses will lead us to praise the game for what it could have been had the team been managed fairly. In contrast, even before Forces was gutted to make the holiday season, I don't imagine it ever really had a creative bone to call its own. Everything feels so auto-generated. It feels like 20 different people worked on the game without communicating at all, and then at the last minute tried to awkwardly knit everything together. The game works, but it tries nothing. It does nothing. It says nothing. And it respects nobody. It commits the most damning crime a video game can commit in my eyes. It wastes your time. Sonic 06 will be remembered. The project and the team held up as people who respected the craft and wanted to create something unique. Admittedly, to their detriment at times, I don't know who the FBI, open up! Forces will no doubt be forgotten if it hasn't already. It cannot even be passionately hated, or loved for that matter, because it engenders nothing. It is a nothing sandwich without the bread. My intention is not to slander, for it is often that junk food films are what will hit the proverbial spot. Rather, my intention, despite my distaste for Illumination and, well, many kids' films and games released in the modern era, is to highlight how damn hard it is to make kids content that is good, that respects the child, and is still suitable for an adult. Easy. It requires desire, ambition, passion, respect, and then also a ridiculous amount of talent to back all that up. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. And yet that sounds like the CV of a certain studio. I can't quite put my finger. Kid movies are good distractions.
They had us the first half, I'm not gonna...
Kid games are fun and kid books are entertaining, and that is the peak of what so many of them achieve, of what so many of them try to achieve, of what so many of them dare to achieve. But as you already know, they can be so much more. And when traditionally child-friendly media tries to be more, it becomes better than anything the adult world can dream to offer, because kids media does just that. Kids media dares to dream up worlds, concepts, characters that would be frowned upon in traditionally adult media. So if you pair that daringness to dream with ambition, trust and respect, you get something remarkable, unique, special. A firework display. What are you doing here? No, fuck off. As I do with admittedly a lot of things in life, I think of it almost like coffee. Most games and films are takeaway coffee from machines, from trucks, wherever. I drink quickly for enjoyment or energy, and despite it being good most of the time, I'll never think about that coffee again. Sometimes if I'm in that part of town or in that kind of mood, I'll remember it being good and go back, but that's the extent of my love, or perhaps more accurately, just my appreciation. But once in a blue moon, you sit down at a coffee shop and they brew up something special. They go that extra mile. They stamp the grounds manually, evenly, and throw it out if they notice any aberrations. They calculate exactly how many milliliters to pour, and they make sure that the grounds themselves are perfectly coarse to hit the sweet spot between bitterness and sourness. Essentially, they just care about you, about the craft, so much so that it is likely to their own financial detriment. And I'll remember that. I will go back. I will tell my friends. Often doesn't really matter because the coffee takes so long that people get impatient and leave. It's not as fast to serve and it's way quicker to consume than a supersized Starbucks beverage. So chances are they're just going to shut down, or they'll probably just get bought out by Starbucks. But I will never forget. And while takeaway coffee isn't bad, it will always be tinged from that point onwards with melancholy, out of the memory of what was once so excellent. And perhaps then you might be thinking exactly what I am, that Super Mario Galaxy is coffee. No one's fucking thing. That's what happens when I go off script. Fuck's sake, man, that's fucking stupid. Why did I... Wait, actually, what if I just made that the title? There are thousands of millions of reasons why Galaxy is so remarkable. One could feasibly talk about Galaxy for the length of a feature-length film, and I have. However, I'm not here to break down why Galaxy is good. Rather, I'd like to discuss why we love Galaxy, why that bond is so unbreakable, why kids love it still, why adults will always cherish its memory, and why I believe it is perhaps the most unforgettable video game experience of all time. There are many things, many films, books, or games that are good, remarkable even, but they do not garner the kind of love and adoration Galaxy has garnered. One could absolutely argue, and I routinely do, that Super Mario 3D World is a better platformer. It takes the platforming framework of Galaxy and improves upon it in every single way. And yet, while I love 3D World, and while many love 3D World, while it surely has fans whose passion would undoubtedly be something to behold, it is not so to the extent of Galaxy. Waiting 5 minutes for these policemen to go away. I'm trying to talk about a children's video game. Because Galaxy is not appreciated, respected, or liked. Galaxy is cherished because Galaxy tries harder, goes farther, and trusts the player to understand regardless of their age. Galaxy doesn't cut corners if there is a corner that needs to be cut. Galaxy simply paves a brand new road. Galaxy is the polar opposite of laziness, no doubt to its own financial detriment, and nothing epitomizes this more than the story. Rosalina would simply be a quest giver devoid of personality or backstory. The Lumas would just be cool, funny creatures or meme fodder with no backstory or explanation. The setting would be just that, the setting. It wouldn't be intrinsically linked to the story. It would simply be the most convenient place for a designer to lay a series of obstacles. See, for example, Lake Lapcat. It is in comparison to Galaxy that one begins to question prior experiences in the series, or in this case, the following experiences. Bowser's Fury had a lot of potential. What was wrong with Bowser? Why was Bowser Jr. so uncharacteristically worried? Perhaps they could have delved further into the relationship between the father and the son. Not to a Last of Us extent, don't get me wrong, but to the extent that, I don't know, Super Mario Galaxy goes to for a side character like Rosalina. But yes, you are indeed right. I would sell my soul for a sniff of The Last of Us Part 3, but I swear that's unrelated. Where is Lake Lapcat? Why is everything a cat? What happened to Bowser? What is anything? Bowser's Fury asks questions but refuses to answer any because it is not obliged to. The game is great, it's very fun, don't get me wrong, but it lacks that intangible X factor that separates the greats from the classics. I don't intend to hate on a fantastic game that many love, rather to illustrate how unique, how remarkable Galaxy is for not just providing that excellent gameplay we see in so many other games, but also that narrative, that contextual X factor without intruding on said gameplay. This ambiguity bothers me, especially after going through Sunshine and Galaxy. Every question Galaxy asks, and Galaxy asks a lot of questions, Galaxy answers with intricate detail. Simply put, no other Nintendo platformer and few Nintendo series, especially outside of the more mature content like Xenoblade, Metroid, Zelda and the like, try as hard as Galaxy does to create a world and then answer every question you have about said world. Very few Nintendo series tackle themes like Galaxy does. Even if another Nintendo-esque kid-friendly mascot game did try, they would spell it out plainly, leaving nothing or very little up to interpretation. See Pokemon, for example, where even interesting angles like dealing with sibling inferiority are just waved away, presenting alternately worded versions of the exact same sentiment they've been saying for 20 years, that one needs to be the very best, the bestest of them all. The manner Galaxy delivers its story breeds loyalty because of how it is in stark contrast to what it needed to do of what other kid-friendly content does. In the new Sonic film, currently still in cinemas, which I did really like. It's a pretty great film, all things considered. However, it consistently risks souring itself with condescending dialogue directed at the audience. For example, Sonic's dad, and I'm paraphrasing because it is still in the cinema, asks, "Well, Sonic, what did you learn today?" And then, naturally, Sonic just surmises all of the themes and lessons from the film.
Whoa, little bro. It's bad for your health, and it stains your teeth.
Just in case some kid at the back got globs of candy floss stuck to their fingers and then tried to wipe their eyes. I really enjoyed this film. It was a wonderful nostalgia-ridden romp down memory lane, but this scene bothered me to an incalculable degree. Trust the kid. Trust them to get it. You risk souring the entire experience when you do that. In Galaxy 2, there is no story, there is no theme, because there is nothing to say. Many of the stages lack that lonely space age kind of atmosphere that the first has, because it's a game and games don't need that stuff, and maybe to you they don't. And while the sentiment is true, I hope by this point I've at least explained why I personally believe that dressing adds so much to the experience. I am at risk of going off topic, but needless to say that despite outliers like the Donkey Kong series, the Luigi's Mansion saga, and the old Mario sports games, like, do you remember the intro for Toadstool Tour? That game took place in a place with characters as against avatars. I mean, compare Toadstool Tour to White Bread the video game, or as it's known colloquially, Mario Golf Super. It is not often that you find a game that cares as much as the Galaxy does, but crucially, it is not often you find a game directed at children that respects the child enough to care. Sonic 2 and Galaxy 2 aren't bad. In fact, they're pretty good, but they are just off of that upper echelon for me. Many argue that Galaxy 2, for example, is better than 1 for understandable and relatable reasons I outlined last time I spoke about Galaxy, but it is inarguable that as an achievement, as a work of art, as a game rather than a toy per se, Galaxy 1 is unparalleled in the respect it gives the player. And that extra context, that extra dressing on the salad, makes all the difference. It makes the world real. It makes Galaxy 1 a classic. When I was only 6 years old, I used to play with my grandfather's chessboard by my lonesome. He would go into the kitchen to converse with the grown-ups, and I'd sit at his chessboard. I'd often see him studying the board, reading books and practicing scenarios from afar. It was enrapturing to watch for some unexplainable reason. It's not like he was any kind of grandmaster, but he was an enthusiast. And I was enthralled by this black and white checkered board adorned with these ornate wooden pieces. When he was off making tea or conversing, I'd often sit there at that board and just move the pieces around aimlessly, not knowing where any of them went or how any of them moved. Couldn't tell you why. Maybe I just wanted to be more like my grandfather. But even though every other grown-up thought it was hilarious, like tragically funny, to watch a kid try and play chess, my grandfather didn't think it was funny, because he just saw me as I was, someone who just wanted to play, to understand. rather than what everyone else saw me as. A dumb kid with a monkey brain who ran towards the shiny chessboard. And he taught me how to play chess. This right here is the library. This door opens when the player claims their first victory over Bowser. It's unobtrusive, and one could feasibly and understandably ignore its presence altogether. Many do by accident or even on purpose, and you know what? That's completely fine. Much like a real-life library, it sits in a nook, detached from the chaos of the rest of the world, acting as a safe space to slow down and read a story. The expression on Super Mario's face is of shock or awe, perhaps. One would not blame him, mind you. Rosalina, the director of this grand observatory, sits in an armchair, a thick leather-bound book in her lap as these young star children sit around. She's reading a story to them. 5 seconds. 5 seconds of characterization more emphatic than many games manage in an entire 20-hour runtime. Rosalina isn't just a mysterious space witch. She isn't just a stoic director of a flying observatory. She is the closest thing these star children have to a mother. And all of a sudden it makes sense. These stars aren't stars, they're just kids. Her kids, her responsibility. Rosalina doesn't beg you to help restore the observatory just because the game needs an end goal. No, this isn't just her home. This is the home of her surrogate children. The star children she has taken responsibility for. The simple fact that she takes the time to read them stories solidifies her understanding of their bond. It is of love. She cares for these children. That empathy extends to you, the player. Rosalina empathizes with you, that you are lost in space, that you're searching for your loved one, because as we will soon see, she knows what it's like to be lost, to lose, and to keep losing again and again and again. This story, that empathy, extends to the kid playing Galaxy on that Christmas evening. This story, this library, exists to give more context to the world, to go the extra mile, to give more context to the simple act of completion. Because Galaxy doesn't presume you don't have any questions, rather it assumes that you probably have at least a couple. Because Galaxy cares about that kid like how Rosalina cares for the Lumas. The story is in service of the child, literally and metatextually. And while in this brief moment before the first page is even turned, we believe we understand the story Galaxy wants to tell, we really are only scratching the surface, grazing the top of the iceberg, the surface level story we expect Super Mario to tell. Galaxy breeds love, because it doesn't force you to listen. It doesn't force you not to listen. It doesn't even suggest if you should listen. Galaxy, like Rosalina, will tell the story to those who want to hear it, and no one else. And if you don't, that's fine. Galaxy's story as such is unforgettable, because the bond you have with that story is one of mutual respect and love. Because Galaxy trusts, Galaxy cares, Galaxy has something to say. Even if nobody wants to listen, Galaxy will speak for the handful who do. My grandfather and I played chess often. I would always lose, and that is not hyperbole. Every mistake he made, I honestly now suspect was intentional. Just a little mismaneuver, a raising of the eyebrow and a cocking of the head, as if to say that even professionals make mistakes. Encouraged by this, I would press on, going on the offensive, desperately trying to capitalize, but nonetheless failing. Always at the final hurdle. But that was fine, because we could always go again. I'm certain it was selfish of me to keep asking for rematches endlessly, but he would entertain my exuberance until I was too tired to continue. All the while, one of my younger brothers would intermittently show up to throw a chess piece or flip the board before running away. Dropping all pretense, this drove me f***ing crazy. While my grandfather put these tossed pieces back on the table, smiling, he'd say to me, "You'll have to teach him when he's older." In Chapter 1, a Luma arrives on Earth. A foreign creature. Lost. A young girl finds this Luma asking it what's wrong. This foreign creature has lost its mother. Immediately, the young girl springs into action, throwing herself headfirst into foolish, hopeless quest to find the star baby's mother, seemingly for no reason, all despite the fact that this mother could be anywhere across the endless expanse of outer space. This chapter, while simple, epitomizes why it is that I love Galaxy Storybook. The young girl is Rosalina, or at least as time goes on, we presume this girl to be Rosalina. We never know for sure, it is never explicitly declared. The game trusts you to come to your own conclusion. Secondly, we immediately presume that this girl is going to spell just because. Just because that's what the plot says must happen so that the next thing can happen. We don't bat an eye. We're used to kids media not really trying. We're used to suspending disbelief when characters make crazy, illogical decisions. We're used to... The young girl does not go to space to service the plot. The young girl goes to space on her own accord because of who she is, not what the writers want to happen. And while now the game plays on our expectations that there is no reason for any of this, that it's just a dumb side story that is inconsequential, all of the context is revealed as the tale slowly unravels, and you cannot help but be enthralled. Chapter 2 and 3 do not advance the story of Rosalina or the Luma, but that does not mean they are insignificant. They are, rather, perfect children's book chapters in that they pace out a story and build up the world. They characterize another aspect of the storybook that I positively adore, providing context. Many of you are going to tune out right after I say this, but I do ask that you hear me out in this one. You know, the coins present in Super Mario Bros. 1. What exactly are they? What are they used for? I mean, like, presumably they're currency, but currency spent on what, for who, and why? Why do they just lie around in such vast quantities in the arranged patterns they do? Nobody knows, because Nintendo presumes we don't care. And in truth, most of us don't care. And if I had not played Galaxy, I also would not care. But now that I see how Galaxy treats its collectibles, how hard it tries with the star bits, suddenly I start to wonder, why did they never try before? Why did we never learn anything about the other collectibles before? I don't care about the coins, mind you. That would be pretentious beyond belief. But I'm just curious if Nintendo even had a backstory in mind, or if they just said, sure, let's just use coins.
Fine, we will fucking use coins then.
And after seeing how EPD treat Starbits, I'm left wondering why everyone else doesn't treat their collectibles the same way. Another platformer that does a similar thing excellently is Ratchet & Clank with those nuts and bolts. A lack of context does not mean something is bad. It is the difference between greatness and excellence. And the star bits epitomize this. Rosalina forgets to pack enough food and water for this trip. She's distraught, but only momentarily, as the Luma explains what other Lumas eat to survive. They subsist on a diet exclusively made up of a delicacy called starbits. They have enough water content to hydrate and enough energy to sustain while also being flavorful. I mean, it's a deus ex machina for sure, but these starbits are scattered throughout the solar system, the remains of long dead stars. This explains why in the main game, you constantly find starbits lying about. You collect starbits to feed Lumas so that they open up paths to alternate stars and the like. Any other kid-friendly game would leave it there. In Super Mario 3D World, you collect green stars to open levels. Why are there green stars here? Who cares? Why do they open levels? Who cares? And like mentioned earlier, nobody. It is only in retrospect that we begin to care and then look elsewhere and wonder, why do they not.
Galaxy is not only one of the best platformers I've ever played.
It's the kind of game I imagine other AAA studios look at and go, what are we even doing over here?
In Sonic, why do Wisps give Sonic the ability to boost in one game, but in all the others he just has the innate ability to? What are the red rings and what is their relevancy to Sonic going into his super form? What are the sunflowers in Yoshi? What are the boxes doing in Crash Bandicoot? The answer to all of these is nobody should care if the gameplay is good enough. And that is true. I cannot stress that enough. That is true. But the people behind Super Mario Galaxy care about being more than what they should. Galaxy's gameplay is excellent, but it answers that question anyway, just in case you do care. Regardless of your opinion on the game, on a fundamental human level, I believe Galaxy will always be admired as an achievement because they didn't just go the extra mile, they went across every extra mile, back and forth, several times. Later in Chapter 3, in much the same way, we learn of how Rosalina found the Comet Observatory, though at the time we don't realize what it would become. Now it is simply a comet, a place for Rosalina and the Luma to rest. Then the page turns and there isn't even a consolation, because it is a statement that cannot be argued with. It just would be nicer if her family was here, and it just is sad that they are not. It is sad, and nothing anyone can say changes that reality. And that is not where that thread ends, because perhaps that sadness doesn't need to be forgotten or left behind. Maybe that sadness need only be acknowledged for what it is, that it exists, that it is true. To pretend that it isn't is to stop being who you are, and that is what Chapter 6 believes. Floods of Lumas descend on the comet, all declaring that they've found their mother, in reference to Rosalina. Rosalina laughs and welcomes them to their new home, not once asking why, not turning a single one away, not asking any of them whether they've got adequate certification. But later that night, walking the dog, I realized that no, she does. And the fact that I think she doesn't is the entire point of everything. Maybe her understanding is exactly what compels her to make said decision. Maybe I, the reader, need to show this kid enough respect to acknowledge that despite her age, she has the empathy and the intelligence to understand. Maybe that's something Galaxy wants to impress upon the reader. I find that there's an ironic, possibly unintended metatextual angle that I believe Rosalina to be too young, naive and uninformed to make that decision, and yet believing in the intelligence of the youth is such a central theme in Galaxy, because despite her age, Rosalina has been through so much that she never speaks of, that she keeps bottled up, keeping busy, coping by caring, but keeping all that sadness bottled up inside only leads to, well, maybe it would be better if you simply read for yourself. And the chapter ends there. I have not edited a page out. That is where it ends. Because that is exactly the point. There is not much to say. Her mother is dead, and that is so sad. The Lumas, like us, are left somewhat speechless. And Rosalina is left to cry. And does it not feel so quaint now to think Rosalina acted without reason? So put yourself back in the year 2009. You finish reading this chapter, and you can do a sum total of nothing. You have to leave the library and then go on collecting stars and beating levels as if you didn't just read it, as if you weren't thinking about what had just occurred and dying to know what will occur next. And then something strange happens. You start collecting stars faster than ever, more frantically than ever, because you desperately desire that happy ending. So you do and do and do, completing levels and missions and action set pieces, chasing that speck of light, and then you get there and the page turns. And suddenly you're not even playing the game to beat it anymore. You're not even playing the game for fun, to relax, to unwind. You are playing this game to write the next chapter, to give Rosalina that happy ending, to give the Lumas that happy ending. You want to make a difference. You want to save the observatory. You want to learn more about this endless, infinite galaxy. You are completely immersed. When chapter 8 begins, a Luma approaches Rosalina to offer words of wisdom. Wisdom that the kid Luma doesn't really understand, is kind of worthless if not for the unintentional empathy and love so intrinsically intertwined with what is said. The Luma explains that Rosalina's mother lives on through her, and draws an analogy that illustrates a central theme in Galaxy. The cycle of life self-perpetuates. Lumas become comets. Comets provide homes for Lumas. Lumas can become stars, and stars provide power and energy to everything, including a space station home to more Lumas like the Comet Observatory. After they pass, Lumas become star bits, which is certainly disturbing, but looking through the rose-tinted lens of Galaxy's naivety, it is heartwarming in a way. Death in Galaxy is real, but its take on the repercussions of death are simultaneously tear-jerking and hopeful, while being doubtlessly inspirational. It is sad that Rosalina's mother is dead. That is undeniable. It was sad yesterday, it is sad today, and it'll be sad tomorrow. But alongside that sadness, there exists the opportunity to keep going, to use what lives on in you from your dearly departed to make the world a better place for someone else. Moving on is not leaving behind. Moving on, rather, is moving with. Rosalina is a better mother for having known her own, and the cycle of love perpetuates itself as those Lumas learn that loving selflessness. And that is what Galaxy says. The following is the final chapter of the storybook. And in a neat circular bow tie ending of an arc, we end this storybook where we began the game with Rosalina visiting Earth for the first time in 100 years, scattering starbits across the land. That, as it happened, was the Star Festival we saw in the opening, the catalyst for this unforgettable adventure. All of this character, all of this context, all of these messages would be absent without the storybook, without this entirely optional, completely un-Mario, non-kid gaming mechanic. There are masterstrokes, and then there is the storybook of Super Mario Galaxy. It is undeniable that Super Mario Galaxy would not have garnered such unparalleled infatuation, such unrivaled passion, such unforgettable love without the beautiful desolation of Galaxy's storybook. With it removed, you lose almost everything that makes Galaxy special. You lose context, character, you lose the entire world Nintendo lovingly crafted. In my retrospective video doc of Galaxy, I concluded with a simple statement. Thank you, Nintendo EPD. Because sometimes busting out the thesaurus and using as many syllables as possible means less. Because Nintendo EPD already had a great game. They already had beautiful music. They already had a timeless, unique art style. But they said no. That is not enough when it so evidently could have been. They added something that would alter the course of Galaxy's destiny, from being a footnote in a book to be written in 20 years' time about the evolution of video games from toys to art, to being allocated the entire book. They added Rosalina's storybook. I visited my grandfather in a care home in the December of 2013. I brought my chessboard with me. It was the only time I ever won, but a younger me knew, and today's me knows in my heart, that it didn't, doesn't, and never will truly count. I always thought, or rather expected, that the day I beat my grandfather at chess would be one to remember, a day of celebration. And I remember it, I really do, and I don't think I could forget it even if I tried. Because I distinctly remember crying in the car on the way home. He made it to 2014, passing away early on New Year's morning. And I think about him every day. I see the remarkably positive effect that he had on the people who knew him every single day. And I did indeed teach my brother how to play chess.